Thank you everybody for joining us. We have one action to address. If you haven't had a moment, please look over the minutes. If there's any changes or discussion. If there are none, I'd be open to a motion to approve the minutes. Second,
Seconded.
any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that's it. All right, Lindsay, bouncing through downtown, our art for the NCAA.
Sure, just a really quick update that it's happening. Hannah, for your benefit, I dropped the link just to the Downtown Wichita's website in the chat, but let me see if I can share my screen. But it's happening.
I was able to get it pulled up. I can see it.
Great. It is happening right now or it's under development, I would say. There are 3 artists that they've selected. Let me see if I can get this shared.
No, refresh my memory, who is they,
Downtown Wichita.
downtown Wichita?
Let's see, although it's very
Is this
small.
the basketball thing?
Yes, so this is in lieu of awarding them a Thrive grant, we were able to find an external funding opportunity or a different funding opportunity. But just so you know who the artists are, and we can email this out if this interests you. I've got this fancy new tablet and I am still learning how it works. But they selected 3 artists / arts groups. So Taylor McQuarrie, she's an art, I understand she's an art teacher at West High and has an installation that's going in at 509 East Douglas. And I believe she's involving her students in the design as well. The other one is Mike Glasscock, who is a graphic designer for Goodwill Industries. So I will say Taylor McQuarrie and Mike Glasscock, to my knowledge, have not applied for anything with the city before. So it's exciting to see new names involved. But Mike is a graphic designer, and his design in particular is the Wichita flag made out of basketballs. So if you can imagine, that's scaled.
Wow.
And that's going to be at 102 North St. Francis Street. And then the third one is going to be in Envision's Art Gallery. They're going to do Braille. I'm not sure what it's going to say, but it'll be spelled out in Braille using basketballs in Envision's front windows. So really cool opportunity there. And then Heather, the director for Downtown Wichita, is also encouraging and working with all the different groups who've been awarded funding to participate in FanFest, which is going to be at Napster Park, and or the event that's happening in Union Station throughout the March Madness week here to do some sort of art programming as well. They did have some funding left over from the grant that we awarded them, and that they're also trying to figure out if they can do some painting on the plywood of, Jesse, do you remember the name of the building? It's on Douglas.
I'm sorry, I don't remember off the top of my head.
The building's on Douglas. It's currently kind of boarded up and it's available for lease. They're trying to hire an artist to paint on the plywood to have it so it's not so industrial and doesn't look shuttered. But we're trying to get that done as well in the next 2 weeks. Tight timeline, so we'll see where we can go.
Is that the Broadway Plaza? Is that
Maybe.
Douglas and Broadway
Where's
right
it
there?
at?
Across from. I think what.
I should be able to-
Going by, they'd be
my-
close to that.
Memory is going blank here. And you can see it. It is like across from the Ambassador
That's
Hotel-ish.
That's it.
Gotcha.
Isn't it?
Which
Broadmoor?
thing is up in there?
Yeah.
I thought that was the new DM school. Is there somewhere?
No,
Mm,
no,
Other
not
way?
quite that way.
It's a Broadway Plaza there, that's what it is.
I think it's this building. Is where it might be this
Oh,
corner,
that one, the.
The threat.
the crest.
Mhm.
Thank you. So that is currently boarded up with plywood at the base right now, and they've had some various vandalism issues. But just knowing that we have so many visitors in our community and it's not the most inviting arena, Downtown Wichita is trying to utilize some of the cost savings that they had. They were looking at renting some of the spaces for the artist activations, but they didn't end up having to do that. They got them in kind from the property owners. So this area presented itself. So just so you know, this project is moving forward and we're really excited to see it happen. Hopefully this time next month, we'll have pictures to show you to memorialize that project, but just wanted to share that. So then just rolling into kind of the big discussion item for today is thinking about the future of this funding program. So last year City Council adopted the new strategic plan for cultural arts. And this really gives us it gives this committee a lot of bandwidth into what the future of this program can be. I do want to say it's a successful program. However we want to define success, I think we can be really proud of it. But we do have some opportunities to make it even better. At the top of kind of this colorful worksheet are the two goals related to cultural funding consideration as we're developing the grant program for 2026. So the first one is to evaluate the cultural institution program and assess accountability and community impact measurements. The second goal that they're closely tied together is to revamp the allocation structure of the cultural funding program to support growth, creativity, and accountability. So I might just talk about the cultural institution program in particular, because it's not something that this committee has been heavily involved with in the past, at least to my knowledge. This is our legacy organizations, Art Museum, Aviation Museum, City Arts, Botanica, Mid-America All-Indian Museum, Museum of World Treasures, Cowtown, and Historical Museum. For the most part, it is our understanding that they became cultural institutions because the city has some sort of ownership interest, or that organizations reside in a city property. Of course, each of their relationships with the city is slightly different, but they are essentially guaranteed funding in operational support from the city. So we're not proposing necessarily changing that, but we want to make sure that they're seeing that their performance is measured and it's not necessarily guaranteed increase in funding without performance or measurements, KPIs to back that growth. So over the last 10 years, I believe they just automatically receive that growth, whatever the cultural mill levy equivalent growth is, they're receiving that growth regardless of how they perform. Not to say anyone's performing poorly, but in the same way, when we look at the competitive grants, if we had a way to provide extra funding to the organizations that are just crushing it and really meeting the mission. Conversely, if there's an organization that's underperforming, we have no way to address it. They get the same amount of money no matter what. And at the institution level, several of them receive significant funding from the city. So we want to make sure that there's accountability, that they're good stewards of taxpayer dollars, et cetera. So that's institution program currently works. One of its biggest limitations, and I would say one of our largest limitations even in our competitive grant program, is that there's no pipeline. Become a cultural institution, and no cultural institution can cease becoming one. They're just, if you're grandfathered in that category, you're there. So one of the things that we've been brainstorming, gosh, maybe for 3 years now, is how to create a more equitable approach. So that's kind of what we're presenting today, is an option for thinking through this. So then I might just, one more caveat is that we have some cultural institutions that may be eligible to receive more funding if they were in the competitive category than where they're locked in the institution category. So that's an interesting, I think, funding recipients on both sides have a grass is greener opportunity where they're like, well, if I could apply for the funding, I could get more. And conversely, some organizations are like, I would just like to know what I get, just lock me in at a rate and I'd be happy. So what we wanted to design is a pipeline so that organizations can rise and fall depending on where they are in the market, how they're performing, that we can reward success, that we can address situations where they're not meeting performance measures, et cetera. That all makes sense. That's a lot of information. And I think right now we're really looking at a very macro level. Well, we'll call out a few organizations and their operational structure. We're really just trying to address it as holistically as possible to ensure equity and access to public funds. So if we start in the green square, the cultural institutions, all the existing ones are listed there, but we kind of figured figured out ways to draw a few different lines, and they're completely negotiable, but this is at least where staff see an opportunity, is to look at organizations that have 20 years of history serving our residents, and that they have 10 years of serving at the anchor level, which is the next tier. So I would say 10 years of receiving city funding already. So they've been stewards of city funding for over 10 years. So we know that they're a stable organization. I will say being a cultural institution should not be easy. It should be something that comes with great weight, because this organization lives up to the institution category. So with that in mind, the last bullet point on the list is the examples of organizations who we think would fall into that category. And the number next to them is the number of years they've received grant funding from the city. So just for reference, so Arts Partners, Exploration Place, TCAM, MTW, Ulrich, and Symphony are all in that 13 to 15 years of receiving the funding. And what we're proposing for those organizations, if we move them into the institutional category, that they would be on a multi-year contract of 3 to 5 years. And I believe, Jesse, correct me if I'm wrong, that we would just average their past funding. However we determine that, I think it's on a later page, but we'd average their funding allocation based on what they've received in the past and just lock them in that that's what they're going to receive for the next 3 to 5 years. And then we readjust or we reassess with a new negotiation or taking in consideration their performance measures over the following 3 to 5 years.
I will step in. That is one plan. Unfortunately, the plan that is presented on these pages is they receive a fixed percentage of the total. So
thank you.
it's the idea is that when you hit cultural institution status, you receive a fixed percentage of the total. Obviously, the way that Lindsay just said it is another way to do it. It's just, if I was to get into the weeds of every single permeation of this, we would overwhelm the committee. So please keep Lindsay's version in mind while you're looking at the one that has been presented on the second page today.
Thank you, Jesse. I appreciate that. So with that in mind, the second page has kind of a breakdown of what it could look like. The institutions then would receive a fixed percent of the funding allotted. So for easy math, if we had $10 to distribute, we carve out $5 for the institutions, of which each institution would get a percentage of that. Same way we do, we carve out funding for artist access grants. We just say, this is how much we're going to fund for that. And then whatever's left is what goes into the competitive. Did I say that? Does that mean, Jesse, can you say that better?
Yeah, I mean, it's, yeah. So we looked at the 6 that we're suggesting today, and we said, okay, they are currently about $200,000 of our 500,000 that we give out. If we kept that top number the same, 200,000, how can we equitably spread that amongst these organizations? And other documents we have percentages, and so I took the spirit of those percentages and applied it here. So if an organization has a parent organization, usually they're getting a slightly lower percentage, and then the ones that don't have parent organizations are getting a slightly higher percentage.
Thanks, Jesse. Yeah, you cut out a little bit, but which I think that primes the kind of talking point of parent organizations. So you see them asterisked throughout the list on the second page. And this is kind of where I have a lot of opinions and recommendations as staff, but would love to know like what the committee feels. In the spirit of equitable access to public funds, several organizations already receive public funds in other ways. 2 in particular received public funding from the city in other avenues, and several others received either university level funding or state funding. So or county funding, excuse me. So trying to figure out a way to not discourage them or this has nothing to do with the impact that they have in the community or the services that they provide, but really to just try to sort out equitable access to public funding. That's what we're trying to figure out. So in the proposal, or I think, Jesse, what you got cut out saying is Those with parent organizations would receive a slightly smaller percentage of the funding because they are already receiving funding in a different avenue. And or the committee could elect to not fund them or fund them in different ways through a programmatic option, et cetera. And just real quickly, if we fly through the list, or I might start with Envision Foundation, because that one has come up in the last couple of years of an organization that has a parent entity, but doesn't necessarily, but operates independently of such. Other ones, KMUW and Ulrich Museum are the two that are funded by the university in part, although they definitely have to make up a big part of their budget. They don't necessarily, it's my understanding that they don't have to pay the same, they have some sort of funding mechanism that supports their operations. Is that a safe
Yeah.
assessment? Okay. And then there are a few others that receive county funding, Exploration Place, TCAM, and then for the sake of the full institution category, Arts Council and Wichita Central County Historical Museum. All of those receive dedicated operational funding from the county. And why I think it's one of the many talking points or things to be thinking about is the city and county have continued conversations of what a shared service model could look like for cultural arts. If that does happen, how do we do that? And it might likely be that there are county seats on this committee to help address that and to expand this committee's work to a county level and not just city. So then we have to think about like, okay, well, if Exploration Place is receiving dedicated funding from the county and now also the city, is that equitable access to public funds? Not to discredit the work that they're doing, but really just trying to carve that out. So that's where we have recommended, or we're brainstorming what a lower percentage of cultural funding allotment would be versus the organizations that don't have a parent organization. Allison, I see you thinking, do you have?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Going back to the institution category.
Go for it.
So when you say that they would be getting a percentage, that would be more consistent, right, each year, it's still gonna be, the percentage is based on size of the organization. It's not a peanut butter approach, like there's 10 organizations, and they're all getting 10%. The percentage would vary
Correct.
per organization.
And I think our approach, and Jesse, correct me if I explain this wrong, but the approach would be to look at their past funding and average that out. Or no, that's.
So there are several ways of looking at it. The existing cultural organizations, the existing cultural institutions, excuse me, the ones that are orange on your list, they would maintain their current levels just for ease. At this point, they would maintain their current levels. And the other 6 that are purple and blue would come in at 6.93 or 6.13% of our total amount of funding, which would be of that $500,000. If we added cultural institutions in the future, that percentage would need to change, but we would try to maintain the level that they get. So we'd have to look at, additional funding or just shifting things around. But right now, the version of the plan that you're seeing is to bring them in at a set percentage. And then that goes up and down depending on how the local economy does.
But the set
Obviously,
percentage,
as Lindsay's, go ahead, sorry.
the set percentage is being applied to the amount of funds available to be allocated, not as a percentage of their budget. Is that, I'm just trying to
Correct.
understand.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Percentage of the funds to be allocated.
So for like the Museum of World Treasures, right, they're 32,000, and then you have like City Arts at 700,000. If they both would potentially be getting the same amount at 6.13%.
So current institutions would stay where they are now. It would only be for the organizations who would be coming in. Is that correct, Jesse?
That is correct. That as a step, this is basically step 1. And getting these new organizations in here is step 1. Down the road, we want to make small adjustments every year to continue to make these amounts more equitable. But yes, so step 1, these top 6 would be coming in at the column on the right. And so the columns For the orange ones, the left and right columns should be the same. They will maintain.
Okay, I picked bad examples because they're already in the institution category, but like, if we have an organization that's coming in and is a smaller overall operating budget,
Mhm.
and another organization that's coming in new that has a large operating budget, they would be getting the same dollars allocated to them based on the flat 6.13 or 6.93%. We're
So
doing-
if you look at page 3 of that stapled document, you have bullet points. The second bullet point, it's a white bullet point, says we would need to re-examine this whenever we have a smaller organization reach cultural institution status. So, is it that an org has to have a particular annual expenditure to be an institution? Or would a small cultural institution receive a smaller percentage because of their size? Or do we just give Wichita Chamber Chorale $30,000 a year? Like, there's multiple options here.
And there is discussion with the evaluating the cultural institutions with changing legacy ones funding levels. So if there
Right.
is and the metrics for determining the success of these institutions would be determined by city council, the city, this committee, or who would determine that?
Great question. Currently they're contracted to reflect the cultural plan. So they should have similar standards that all of our funding recipients receive across the board. Some of them have slightly different ones based on the city's ownership interest. So that's where like City Arts is a big anomaly because we own and operate it fully. It receives no other funding sources because that's the business model that we have here. It'd be a conflict if they were going out for the same sponsorship as others, as it currently is modeled. And then similar like Art Museum and Botanica have endowments attached to them because they're gifts to the city that we are then contracting them to manage. So they have different requirements based on managing those facilities. So I don't know if that answers your question directly, but I think we would want to involve this committee in reviewing their annual reports as they relate to the performance measures that we've outlined.
So there's like opportunities for those that are performing lower to potentially see a decrease in funding. And like say, Kansas Aviation Museum's doing well with their programming, could get the opportunity in their next cycle to increase their funding.
That's what we would like to be in the position to do, that we could reward success, but then we could also address underperformance when it's happening. And then we could address it in real time, saying like, hey, we noticed like your numbers were down this year over last year. Like, what's going on? What are you doing? In the same way that we've seen that work in the competitive grant program, where we don't really have a mechanism to do it in the institution program other than in relationship building. I will say we also have new directors at almost all the organizations. So we know that this is a time of change for all of them. What we don't want to do is pull the rug out from under anyone. And we want to create more stable funding environment. I won't say sustainable because it's always subject to appropriations, but we want to have a more stable environment for the organizations. So whether they receive a huge influx of funding without any performance measurement, or they're doing an amazing job and we have no way we just give them a high five, that we don't really have a mechanism. So this is where we're just trying to build that pipeline. And if a cultural institution should fall from being an institution, or the committee or a review body sees that like, hey, they are no longer meeting their performance, this is not the best investment of taxpayer dollars, which we have a responsibility to, we could lower them then to the cultural anchor tier. So we're not necessarily just saying good luck out there. We have an opportunity to drop them down, hopefully to help them figure it out, but we have a mechanism for them to go up or down. I think in the immediate, like, we're just trying to get organizations up there who we funded them for 15 years. At some point, we just need to write them into the budget. This is our approach to doing that in a measurable way.
Yeah, we're going to fund MTW is more than likely. They continue the grant proposals the way they're doing, which they have, for instance, I've been on this committee.
Yeah.
They're going to get the lion's share, so at least getting them out of that competitive pool down below.
That's Wish Place too, right?
Yeah.
And the FY
If I
'25,
could jump in really quick. I'm sorry, I just have to go. I apologize. Thanks everybody for jumping into this massive question with us. It's been just Lindsay and I pounding heads against things, and we appreciate you now being tortured along with us. So
Thank you, Jesse.
Thank
Good luck with your presentation.
thank you. See you.
Hannah, chime in if you have any questions. We're purely in the brainstorming session as we have an opportunity for 26 funding to make small steps in a more equitable direction, or what we feel.
So, the cultural institution, 3 to 5 year rolling contract with fixed funding. So that's fixed for 3 to 5 years, no matter what the ability is, no matter how many applicants we have.
So that's currently how our institution program works, that you're written into the budget at that set amount. And if there's an AV growth, which there has been a lot over the last years, they get that AV growth immediately. So for this year, there's a 7.9 increase. All the institutions receive that increase. And any future organization would receive the equivalent of that increase, but they're only getting potentially a percentage of that pot available, so a percentage of a percentage. But it would just put them in the equation to automatically receive that funding.
So the FY 25 column is the funding that was provided or would be provided fiscal year 25. The plan 1 is with the 6.13 or 6.93% being applied. Is that what plan 1 means? Like a lot of them are different, there's some little tweaks.
I believe so. So all of the institutions in orange would be the same or should be
Yeah.
the same. It's the ones that Arts Partners through Symphony, those are the new organizations coming in. That's where their funding would be
Would
adjusted.
be adjusted, okay.
And
So
that's about ballpark of what, if we had them in this program for this year, what they could have received.
So the only, and I'm probably not doing a very good job of articulating my thought, but my only concern, because we're basically categorizing them based on this time element, right? How long they've been, have a history of serving residents, how long, right? I mean, that's kind of what we're looking at. How long have they been in place? The longer, the more.
I'm thinking here, I was new to this committee, but I knew through it for a loop, but Mark Arts came out of nowhere and applied for funding. I mean, that wasn't like a RISE or some little organized society. They came in and applied for funding, had a very good application, been around, and fully expected a large chunk of money. We could get there.
Yeah,
You're asking about like just.
So I understand the time element. The thing that I'm questioning is I'm gonna call it a peanut butter approach of taking the 6.13% and applying it to all the organizations regardless of their operating budget or size.
Yeah.
So it feels like, so a really small organization that's been around for 20 years would end up getting the same amount of money as a really large organization that's also been around for 20 years. And that's where it feels.
Yeah.
And that's not how I'm seeing this. Like my thing, because even some of the numbers are going on that we're modifying from the 2025
I
plan.
don't think it's happening here
Okay.
necessarily. I'm just saying in terms
It
of,
could happen.
in
It could
terms of
happen, yeah,
process.
it could happen.
It could
And I
happen.
think
So
that's where
like
we-
the tax flute, okay, let's just say they've been around for 20 years all of a sudden.
Mhm.
And now they're gonna get 6.13% of the budget, but normally they get $200.
so that's where they would have to be in the program
Mhm.
for, I mean, they'd have to be a cultural partner for 10 years before they,
But when it happens.
before an institution. So the likelihood of them growing to that larger level, or what we currently define as larger, is very likely. To Jesse's point, I think it was, we'll reassess it if and when we start getting in that category. But all the current cultural anchors listed in the pink
Yeah.
are who's kind of would be in
On,
the pipeline
on the slate for current.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of it
Yeah.
from a process standpoint, it just feels funny to me that we're applying a standard
Mhm.
set percent to every organization regardless of their operating budget or size.
Sure.
So
Like that, it feels like there should be two aspects. How long have you been serving the residents? And then also, how big of an organization are you?
How's the current funding, like, we'll say Aviation Museum and Museum of World Treasures, how's their funding determined?
That's a great, I was just thinking of those two, likely very similar relationships with the city in that the city's essentially their landlord. We provide the facility, but the operations, the collection, everything falls to the nonprofit. We have no oversight in what they do other than facility management. So they also are receiving capital improvement funding on top of it as we manage the facility. So I don't know how those numbers came to be, but they're not the same. Should they be the same? Maybe, maybe not. I hear you loud and clear though, of like how size of organization could be another variable that we address, and there are size of operating budget.
Yeah, yeah. Because I think, I would imagine there's some aspects for how, like the Wichita Art Museum, think of the size and scope of their space for the city. They're gonna obviously need more money than a smaller organization like the Arts Council.
But can I offer a counter argument to that? If
Yeah.
any organization received the same funding level, would they be performing a similar level? If they had access to that funding?
Yeah, that's kind of where my mind was too. You know, that's a lot of money. I am a huge fan of the Wichita Art Museum. I think they've done a great job with the programming over the year. And I mean, if you look at the money we have to play with between two organizations, of that $6 million is being absorbed. Roughly $4 million goes to two organizations out of that. So if we had some of that money to play with, this committee has done a fantastic job. Staff has done an amazing job bringing groups to us like Juniper that have never applied for funding. And we did a really good job of funding broadly those smaller organizations, but actually making, I feel we made a substantial financial impact in some of these smaller organizations. And if we have some of that, if I'm hearing what staff is saying, that adjusting these institutions so we can adjust that pot in the, what we call it, the bottom tier again, in the cultural partner range, that we can have an even greater impact on these developing ones. Because I would argue groups like Exploration Place, they have the capacity to find money. Their grant proposals, since I've been on this committee, yeah, fantastic.
And this is where it's, I eat my own words a lot when Jesse and I have been brainstorming this. We do want to support organizations that are crushing it. And we don't want to say like, you don't need our money, because they absolutely do, in the same way that every organization does. We want to have a more equitable access to public funding. One of the approaches and why Exploration Place is lower on this list is that as a county funded recipient, that they would receive a lower percentage of that lot. One thing that we could explore with the organizations that have some sort of public ownership, so county technically owns Exploration Place, although the nonprofit really handles the operations, but look at their percentage of operating funds. So if we set a cap to, they had to fundraise 60% of their budget or earned income for 60% of the budget. So we would cap what the city provides. So looking at art museum, historical museum, I think is another good example. If we capped, like, we'll give you this guaranteed amount, but it has to be 40% of your operating budget. That we have our clear budget standard, but they also have to be earning revenue, earning income to some extent. So that's one of the percentages that we have floated around, because we don't want to discourage them. But again, equitable access is what I just keep going back to. That's our goal that we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I'm kind of hearing that we're all on that same page. There's some consensus around like making this category a thing. And like, I feel like I'm aligned with Allison on, it feels also like maybe there should be a little bit more, or maybe there is in your guys' head, but I'm just not hearing it, but like a little bit more like phasing or structure to like how people move into these categories, right? Cause like, there's also a tipping point with 501c3s where if too much is coming from one vendor, right, then they can get in IRS trouble. So
Right.
I don't want to throw laughing fee into IRS trouble land, right?
Sure.
Right, like giving them $15,000 all of a sudden, we were giving them $5,000.
When they're not
We
prepared
Probably
to-
thought through all this, but like that would be helpful
Mhm.
for my brain to just be like, this is not all of a sudden, which is a little bit how it feels. It's like, oh, all of a sudden you're gonna be an institution and hooray, and here's thousands of dollars, right? Which I know is not what we're saying. but just understanding that process a little bit more. That's like more of that process.
Well, and that's where becoming an institution should not be easy.
Mhm.
It should be thorough because we're
Mhm.
essentially putting them on a multi-year, up to 5-year contract. Typically, our contracts are 3 years with an automatic 2-year renewal unless something goes awry. So we're putting them into that lane. There's going to be a lot of contractuals against it to support, but we also don't want to make this harder than it needs to be. We don't want to confuse organizations that are like, forget it, like it's better
Yeah.
for me to spend my time securing a sponsorship
Right.
than working with the city.
Yeah.
We don't want that to happen. So
And I totally appreciate like some of these people that we're always gonna fund. Like, let's not make them
Right.
apply every dang year, just give them
Right.
money, right, for 3 to 5 years.
We-
I think that's really good.
That was the reasoning behind doing.
Yeah, 100%.
yeah, well, and like they still have to do their annual reports. We still have a review of their
Yes.
annual reports. And that's something that like has to be consistent.
Yes.
So it's not a full guarantee, but we recognize they're good stewards of public funding. They're doing good work. They've been doing it for 20 to 30 years. Keep on, let's get out of the way and let's just support
Let me
them.
ask you, then is there a path forward for those that would come on to the
Yeah.
institutional group? Is there a path forward to them to reach a higher level of income from the city?
There could be, I will say, unless we get a surge in the pot of money, we don't see that really being possible.
Right.
And that's where I'm cautious to say current institutions should not receive the AV growth, but I think when you look at Art Museum, it's hard to not look at their funding and see an opportunity there, that they got an automatic about $300,000 increase in this year's funding cycle without any performance measure attached to it. And not to say that they're incredible stewards of that funding. The city has an obligation to fund it. We have no reason to not want to fund it, but we also know how far $300,000 can go in this committee. So if there is an opportunity to cap their percentage growth to not to exceed, and then should it exceed, so this year we had a 7.9% increase. Historically, it's been in the 3 to 4 range. Maybe we contract it to where not to exceed 4%. Anytime we get more than 4%, then that funding, and then go in to fund all this other stuff.
I would also think you could cap on some kind of percentage of operating budget, again, like,
Yeah.
you know, you're gonna get this much with a not to exceed X percentage of the operating budget, so that there's, again, some.
And I like that idea that you guys are talking about there, because now it's also showing that them getting that, say it's 40% they can match and get from the city, that 6% is then getting support from outside, which adds to that overall community support of that organization.
Right.
So it helps us, or whoever's determining that they are valued by the community in some way.
Yeah. And if we're talking about the 3 to 5 years, I'm a proponent of the 3-year. I
Okay.
think 5 years feels like a long time,
Okay,
probably coming out of a tech background, like you don't think about anything in 5 years because everything changes, so I think 3 years seems like a very reasonable,
Mhm.
like solid amount of time for them to plan and to have a 3-year plan around that funding.
and
5
allows-
years just starts to feel like a lot could potentially
Okay.
change.
Is a 3+2 standard municipal kind of contract structure, or is it just our
tough
side?
question to
Okay.
answer. We standardized it in 2022 because almost all of the cultural institutions, their contracts were up for renewal. So that was, we put 3 years in knowing that we were building a new strategic plan, so we didn't want to lock ourselves in. I think I was on the job for 6 months. I'm like, I don't know. Let's do 3 years, get us through the next, we'll have a better idea of what's going on. And now we do. So that allows us to the tech point of things change. We can then adapt to whatever the market is doing as well.
So there's no best practice that the city would say, hey, or city manager's office, let's get us all aligned in the same structure.
Yeah, the only thing that can get a little bit different is when we have leases, and some of our facilities do have leases. Not all of them do, but those we can have the 100-year lease, which we're trying to go away from because that is a very long time. And it's hard to manage the capital expenses on those leases. So those we're trying to get away from. I will say the institutions prefer a longer contract because
It helps
they're
them
planning
perform
their
better
budget years out.
When you know, yeah, for sure.
and it helps give them this financial stability as they're building their staff, their operations, their
Right.
programs. They prefer the stability. So that's where with the 3-year with the option to renew for 2 years.
Okay.
But I'm hearing a preference for 3 years, which I think is perfectly fine, given that this is a huge shift in the program. And in the event it's an epic failure, then we,
Maybe we,
Where's
try it,
not
yeah,
stuck
but
in it.
maybe the next iteration after those 3 years pass, we do say 3 with the 2 to extend.
and maybe we win the lottery by then, to where the funding pool has grown significantly.
Gotta buy a ticket to win.
There-
I keep forgetting that stuff.
So my wife keeps reminding me, get your bag.
So we're definitely still refining this, to your point of wanting to see like some more details.
I think it's all there, I just need to understand a little
I
bit.
think what we're looking for is like, is this a viable direction to go into for the 26 funding cycle? Because right now we're building out the grants. We would typically, I don't know that we have a typical anymore, but we would launch the grants May, July-ish, for next year. So we really need to be developing those now, but we want to make sure we're in line with what the committee would recommend. Time flies.
Yeah.
Would you ever engage any of these organizations that would be impacted most, directly? Would you ever float the idea and get feedback from them? Or-
Yes, and this is something that we've been talking with them about since Justin and I started, because we recognize the challenges in it. And in your strategic plan here, there is a whole chapter on funding limitations and funding structures. I might draw your attention to page 62, which showcases our funding structures. And then a little bit further is the cultural funding program on page 70 with a whole list of challenges. This was all developed in conversation with the organizations. So we've captured what's not working or what we don't think works effectively from our relationships that we have with organizations. I will say we have not fleshed out any of this with them. I have reason to believe that many of those listed in the institution category or who would move into it would prefer being on a multi-year contract, MTW, Symphony, our Arts Partners, TCAM. I think that this would make their lives a little bit easier.
Agreed.
And again, just that stability. Yeah, I just don't think we can undervalue how much that means to an office.
I think we've also seen a unique growth in the medium to like the bumping from medium to large. And another point of conversation is like that audit $500,000 threshold, because where $500,000 got us in 2013, when that was put into the previous plan, that spending power is very different than it is today. So we have lots of organizations who are moving over that, but are also panicking a little bit on the audit side of things. So Harvest Arts, Tallgrass, Wichita Children's Theater and Dance Center, they're teetering at that level, or if not, receive some huge specialty projects that put them over it, but the audit requirement is more expensive than it's worth, or the timing doesn't work. So we want to be mindful of that. Ballet bumped up this year for the first time, and has some growth within them that we're excited to see. I think we've seen this exciting growth happening, but we don't really have any way to really put it in a pipeline to say you're doing great work. And I think so. Maybe we'll pivot and talk about like the difference between cultural partner and cultural anchor. For the sake of like simplicity, cultural partner is what we currently have. This is your first time funding recipient or maybe newer organization. So they're either new to the program or new in the community or relatively small in operational size. 2 years of serving the residents of Wichita, and it's still operational funding. So pretty much the same. The cultural anchor category is they would have to have 10 years of history of serving the residents, and have been in the city's funding program for 5 years. So that's kind of where we've put that. Cultural anchor could also be a multi-year funding program as well. Our recommendation is 3 years for that, to just lock them in at a rate and then we reassess. And that kind of pushes them into the stability mode. They still have to perform. If they fail to perform, they could fall out of it. I think there's so many caveats here, but one thing we'd like to do is offer the organizations an opportunity to like apply into the program that they want to be in. So if a cultural institution thinks that they'd be better off in a cultural anchor program, which I think like Aviation Museum over these last few years probably would have been eligible for more funding. I don't know how the committee would have ranked them, but their growth over the last few years is just so exciting. They would have maybe performed better had they been in the anchor category. So if an organization was eligible to apply into institution, but they liked where they were because they had more flexibility, they could elect to stay there. Just so that they're sort of in the driving seat of their own market as well.
The only problem I see with that idea is that that could vary from year to year,
Mhm.
depending on what programs they're trying to
Yeah.
put in. You know,
Mhm.
the following year, they may not be as robust.
Right.
So then could they go back to being just in the institutional group?
If it's the will of the committee, anything's possible. So my quick answer.
Yeah.
But I think at that time, we would be on a multi-year contract. So in that 3 years, they could elect to change every 3 years. And that's where that option to renew, like maybe at that option time, they're like, you know what, we're better served in this category or this one.
Yeah.
That gives them the flexibility to move as they evolve. I don't know if that answers your question,
Yeah, it
but,
does.
but
Would the institutions be more, so could you choose to go to that, or would that be invite, and then once you're there, then you have a choice after 3
oh,
years?
that's a good question. Invite or choose.
If we're looking at one where you have to perform so well and create a level of service to get to the cultural institutions part, that it should be something they aspire to, and if you don't,
Mhm.
not a good steward for the public funds, and
Right,
you go back down to the anchors and you're competing with everybody else.
yeah.
So that does put the onus on whoever in charge of invitations.
Yeah,
For that process.
I know.
my initial thought is that equitable access is giving them the opportunity to apply versus because they've met these standards that are, everyone has the ability to meet those standards or could go into that category. I would say it would be optional, not invite. That's my.
If I could jump in here,
Please.
just what you're saying, it sounds like there are a few things that may happen with this change. Like it sounds like this would be a potential addendum to the current strategic plan. Is that, or is it within?
It's within our abilities that the strategic plan gives us. So those two goals are evaluate and assess, and then also revamp the structure of the program. So this, I would say, falls within our revamping.
Okay, so what I'm thinking is, and I don't know where the current cultural institutions are at as far as nearing the end of their contract, because if we are going to negotiate new contracts and renegotiate the existing funds, I do worry that we have a time limit before the 2026 funding applications would normally begin. So that's my concern. And then what is the role of this committee as far as, reassessing performance? And are we talking about, cultural institutions are kind of just assumed, but cultural anchors do need an actual application at the end of their contract term. So I guess I just have some, not like hesitations, because I do think this is definitely needed and it's going to really assist the current institutions or organizations we see that would really benefit from some long-term funding. But I just want to make sure that it's not too much to like on a short time limit before, July.
Yeah, no, great observations and questions. I think to the first part, any current cultural institution would not be directly impacted by this. They are on those multi-year negotiated agreements. I think we only have 2 coming up, but they're renewals in 2027. So current institutions would not be impacted directly in this year's cycle, to our knowledge, unless they had some performance anomaly that required us to step in and acknowledge it. This is really just to address I would say the staff identified cultural institutions for the 2026 year. If we wanted to move the organizations highlighted to go into the institution category, I would say for this year, they would have to still apply.
Yeah.
They're not guaranteed based on what they did in 24 for 25, but this would allow them in 2026, they could elect to apply into that multi-year funding.
Okay, so yes, that makes sense. Is the potential proposal to, I guess, graduate these organizations to institution status and then another year add the level of cultural anchor, or are we trying to do both of those tiers this year?
Great question, and I love the word graduate. Because I think that's a perfect verb, so I wrote that down. Yes, is the short answer, is that we would like to start the cultural partner, cultural anchor, cultural institution definitions for the 2026 cycle. We would like to do that. But also
Okay.
it's at the committee, if you think that's too much too fast, or we use it as an educational year, to say this is what's coming in 2027, we could do that as well. I would say the organizations are ready for this to be figured out, but definitely don't want to shift anyone's funding levels significantly year over year. We never want to do that.
I think that we can definitely do it. I think for also the benefit of the committee, having some more time to really process the definition of these tiers so that we are prepared for the next funding cycle.
We are, like,
On that process part for the moment,
Yeah.
I assume we'll, like, we have our normal application and then some additional questions, like if you're wanting to often graduate into the next tier,
Mhm.
you would have a separate set of questions you're gonna answer in addition to like our normal ones, or is it a totally new application from scratch?
This money.
Great
On your level?
Great question. Couple conversations going on, but similar to how the large category works right now, they like check it and submittable, and then they have to upload their audit and there's some more stuff.
Yeah.
It would be the same way as that. So not necessarily, if you want additional questions, we could. We haven't gotten to the narrative or like what those measurements exactly are. But yes, we could do that. So you would say I'm a small, medium, large organization. We're essentially rebranding those to partner anchor
Yeah.
institution.
Well, do they all fill out the same paperwork like we do now?
Also at the will of the
Yeah.
committee. I think that there could be some variations in that. We see benefit in the smaller organizations doing the full process because it's so capacity building for them, but we also know it's laborious for them, but they're doing it. So we could ease up on it, or we could keep the standards the same across the board. If anything, have slightly higher standards for those institution categories. But that I would rely on the committee to kind of guide us through what you'd like to see.
One question. So with the discussions of the joint service agreement with the county, like, I prefer to just move quickly, but what kind of factor could that have into this plan if that occurs? How slow of a process would that be?
Well, my crystal ball is quite blurry.
Yeah.
The likelihood of the shared service model. My response to the timeline, governments do not typically move quickly. That's not what we're known to do. Although I could be surprised. I would guess it would allow for the county to then put funding into this program for some of their organizations where they don't have ownership interests to become more competitive. So they have some organizations which they do not own, they do not operate, who they have grandfathered in their funding model, that then would fall into our competitive model here.
Okay.
So zoo and exploration place, an interest bank arena is totally different in the same way Century 2 is totally different, but zoo and EP are two that I think could potentially move into our institution category.
Okay, that's easy enough then, because those would have set funding that would go
Yeah.
to it
The
already.
ones that would fall outside of that would be Historical Museum, Arts Council, and TCAM, of which I do not believe the county has any ownership interest in, but has longstanding. They've been funding them for a long time. And then the other variable is on the programmatic side is Riverfest, of which the city also funds. So on the programmatic side, what do we do there too? But
Okay.
outside of this conversation.
No, that helps though. I mean, that we could move as quickly. What I'm hearing is we could move as quickly, as slowly as we want. It would have nominal impact if there was an agreement.
And correct. In the meetings that I've attended with the county and the Blue Ribbon Committee, they are not, I wouldn't say envious of the city's program, but recognize that we have a program that's established. They do not. And the institutions that they've interviewed as part of it, highly commend the work that this committee does and the clear process for it. Adam Smith was involved in one of them, and I remember him saying, even though I got a reduction in funding this year, I know how the process works and I understand why I got it and where that funding went when it didn't go here. He's like, not that I agree with what the committee did or didn't do, but the process is clear and transparent and I know where I stand. Versus in the county, they have no idea where they're going to stand. They have a flat budget regardless of its success. And if anything, they did receive a budget reduction for this year despite the success that they've had, and they've never received an inflation growth. Or it's my understanding that they haven't received any sort of growth. They've just been locked in at that, whatever, if they get $100 a year, they've received that same $100 for the last 20 years of operations. They haven't received the equivalent growth that our institutions currently receive.
This is probably a question that you guys all know the answer to, because you've been at this longer than I have. I'm just, like, I would like to see the current institution organizations, the FY25 column to be not include the city funding, like not to include the funding that's outside of it. So, like, I would like to just see those dollars that we're awarding to those.
That's where, that, we don't award, that's what dollars work in the city.
Right.
But-
You would like to see what their other budget is?
But don't we also, we are also providing dollars to some of these organizations that are in the current institution category?
Not what we do.
Nothing.
No, that's just a straight up money. that goes-
The
Art
warrant,
Council?
They're bringing it as an ineligible, right, to our.
Okay,
Yeah.
even the Arts Council. Okay.
they are not a competitive outfit.
Okay,
And we
okay.
thank them for lunch.
okay. So should
I'll make sure that's in the
they,
minutes.
so should we have another category, like, should we have a city-sponsored institution or city and county-sponsored institution category that are all being funded outside of our purview? And then have an institution category that is our, like, I'm just wondering, I don't know that they all belong in the same.
I thought that's what we were trying to get to,
Yeah.
where they are all in the same, from our perspective, they're all in the same pot.
Yeah, we don't even touch that money, that.
But
pays
once
out.
but are we saying we would add some of these like this arts partners exploration, they would get added into the institution category? But they're really not the same, we can't put them on the same playing field as Old Cowtown Museum.
But we're trying to put them on the same thing, so that's our goal.
Well, you guys know, right? Because like I guess, like, they're not taking more money out of our pot,
Right.
right? Like, Caltrans
Right,
gets their
that's my
money.
point, yes.
The way I'm hearing it is that we would establish this batch of money, whatever that is, between these cultural institutions that we don't get from this committee's grant proposal process, we're not looking at that point.
That's not even part of our pot.
Right.
Yeah, we are playing it, if I'm hearing correctly, we're playing the,
I will say it is part of the same pot. This committee's been,
Yeah.
had like a spoonful
Yes.
of the
We'll
pot.
take it out.
And we're trying to
Okay.
like zoom back
yeah,
and showcase the full.
there you go.
And I think this is where city council gets very confused too, like, well, how much are we funding in arts and culture? This allows us to say, this is what we do.
Right.
And this is why we do it. This is our performance measure. We're doing everything. And Allison, to your point of like, kind of, some of them are apples and oranges. Arts Council and Art Museum are currently in the same category as it currently stands, and they've been that way for 10 years. And that's not saying it's good or bad, but it's saying we can have organizations that are very different in the same category. They have slightly different performance measures, but they still have the same bracket, if you will.
Okay.
And wouldn't like an
Okay.
institution get a better stamp on it too, that you're a cultural institution of the city, so just from a clout level, it shows
Right.
support.
If I could jump back in and just have a couple thoughts since we're out of time. I don't know what's on the agenda for our next meeting, but since we do have so many questions, is it possible to just have another meeting discussing this new process? And then I'm definitely going to send you and Jesse like a list of my questions ahead of time and just kind of things that we're thinking about. And then maybe I'll just be more prepared to like discuss what we want to do since we don't have any action items right now.
Yes,
You wanna handle
please
like your
do.
model committee member.
Yes.
I'll be here then. I think that's where like,
I'm not gonna.
our next meeting will also be discussion based because we know that this is meaty. We didn't send you this in advance because we didn't want to we wanted to thoroughly confuse you in person. But we can definitely take some more time, and I mean the document that Jesse and I've been working on is about 40 pages. So we've abridged that to get to here. Happy to continue to revise it and send you what we think is a little bit more could be stomached, but also send us your feedback, ideas, sleep on it, let us know what you think. We're obviously missing some committee members. We want to involve them as well. What I'm hearing is there's some potential with this idea, but also lots of
I like
questions.
the idea a lot.
Yes, absolutely.
I just
Lots of
try to
questions.
understand.
Yeah.
Understood.
My most important question, there's a bunch of content.
This is Doc Green.
So
Was it
good, yeah.
Good. We like Doc Green.
Yeah.
We can do this again. Okay.
Since we are exceeded time, you have a question, Gary?
Well, I just want to go back to Alice's question, because Arts Partners ends up in the same group with WAM, Arts Council. Arts Partners still gets funding from us, they don't get funding out of that fund, that's correct?
Their funding would come, if I'm hearing it right, correct me, Lindsay, they would be getting the funding out of that top tier funding package.
They're not going to say that, even though they're in the listed with institutions.
Yeah, and so that's why we're not taking away funding from any of the current institutions. We're just putting more up into that like guaranteed pot. So if we look at like, historically, we've only looked at like $500,000. Realistically, the pot is closer to 5 million, if not 6 million. We're just trying to put them closer into that. So the competitive grant pool it will reduce to maybe $200,000. But then that allows you to have, it also hopefully frees up some of your time. So you're only reviewing like the partners and anchors on an annual basis and then just doing annual report reviews for the others. So it's taking that annual competitiveness out of the organizations that we have been funding for 20 years. And gives them that stability too.
I mean,
I think it's a really good, I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense.
we've all
I
worked on nonprofits where if you knew you were getting
That could-
$50,000 for 3 years, that for a small organization,
Yeah. It's a
that
sigh
is
of relief.
huge. Yes, you know what you have to play with, and you can plan that way, as opposed to like, I had 45 from the committee last year, now I'm only getting 30, which we've done, which is fine, but
Yeah.
again, you come in with an expectation on your budget, you're gonna be $15,000 more than what you get.
Exactly. Well, and to your point about naming institutions, it will make a world of difference to their,
Their stamp.
to their, yeah. And to, quite frankly, the, ego of the institution at the time, because all of a sudden they're being recognized for what they actually are doing for the community, and that's important.
We are out of time. Just keep in mind, the only really half of the bylaws is how we're handling residents and non-residents. I believe our current bylaws, if you had to work in the city limits and what, or is it not
Tricky.
quite clear yet?
Technically, to be a city board member, you have to be a resident of the city.
Our
I
bylaws are
think-
different.
Our bylaws are not accurate to how we
Yes.
currently function, so more to come on that. I think hopefully, I don't know by the next meeting, but at least by May, I would say we'll have more of an idea of what the county's services will do, because that could open up the opportunity for anyone in Sedgwick County to serve. But any currently serving board members, our approach is
Keep them the same until.
we'll address at their term limit.
Yeah.
Is there any kind of use it or lose it? Like, if you have a 3-year funding, or do we care?
Say more.
Like, if they don't spend the money, or if they don't need them, like, I don't know. I don't know. I'm just
Yeah,
saying, like.
well, that's where-
You know, like, if you don't,
Yes.
we're giving you 3 years and then you don't do something with it and.
That's where the reporting structure is so
Okay.
important. Our current institutions have not had consistent reporting structures. We just cut them the check, but they never told us what they were doing with it. Some
I
of
would
them
say
would.
add it to your list to email Lindsay and Jesse, and we'll talk about it next time.
This, Hannah's holding us to time.
Would you like care to adjourn?
Yeah, is there a motion? to adjourn? Okay, moved in second.
Allison?
Sorry,
and-
I'm-
Okay,
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you. Bye.